adorable creatures are called Fatal Fluffies. I'm sure you will enjoy their deadly secret. Sincerely yours, the Cobra Commander.
The Pyramid of Darkness and Season 1 are officially underway, but with that comes the arrival of the cuddly but polarizing Fatal Fluffies. And are they the missing link to one of G.I. Joe's greatest controversies? This is G.I. Retro.
Now, back to G.I. Joe.
Yo, Joe, and welcome everyone back to G.I. Retro, where we are revisiting and celebrating each and every episode of G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, the Sunbow Run, and we're finally here. We are into Season 1 with the start of the Pyramid of Darkness, Part 1, The Further Adventures of G.I. Joe, originally aired September 16th, 1985. And there is a lot to talk about with this episode, a lot that I want to highlight and do a little bit of a deep dive on. So let's get right into it. New miniseries, new season, new intro. So let's talk about the new intro here. And like the last one, showcases a lot of the new faces that are going to be debuting here in this miniseries and become prominent throughout Season 1. Alpine, Bazooka, the Crimson Twins, just to name a few. And then also already established names showcasing that they will continue to be focal points like Flint, Lady J, Shipwreck. But a few frames into this thing, we're already getting to our missing in action figure. And that is, of course, the very famous Cobra Mothership. Famous because, yes, it was never in the original toy line, and even to this day, it has yet to feature in any sort of official toy line. It was a Super 7 sort of Kickstarter, fell short of the backers, so it has never officially made it into any line. And really kind of stunning when you think about it, just how memorable it is just from this intro alone, the impact that it made. You see it getting destroyed in there, but you see a lot of the detail. And much like that big flying cobra-headed plane from the Revenge of Cobra miniseries, so too in this, this could have been Cobra's answer to the USS Flag. Could have been just Cobra's absolutely massive vehicle that you got to play with and everything like that. And it is a little bit of a shame that it never made it into the toy line. I'm sure, in the future it's going to happen. I'm pretty confident of that. And there's already some great customs out there. I got to see a couple of them at Joe Fest. Actually, it was really cool. But it's still not quite the same as having actually been a part of it, with the original run of the 3 3/4 inch action figures. It's just such a missed opportunity there. Although maybe it would have been one of those things like who could have even afforded it, but I digress. Another, we're going to get into the sort of the plot of this episode, but a couple other potential MIAs, most notably another one that would have had to have been massive are the water robots that feature so big in this episode. They're not really ones that, as a kid, I would have been clamoring for, but in rewatching this, they could have had some pretty cool sort of toyetic elements with the ability to fill them with water and what you could have done with that. To have them be the actual scale as they appear in this miniseries, though, I mean, they would have had to have been gigantic. I mean, when you see how small Cobra is in the palms of their hands and, using submarines like baseball bats and everything like that. I mean, they would have had been so huge. It just wouldn't have been feasible. But, I think back sort of at the Toy Biz Sentinels weren't exactly to scale either, but we eventually got a Sentinel that was decent size. So maybe they could have done that with these water robots, but not glaringly missing like something like the Cobra Mothership. But new intro, I still lean towards the Revenge of Cobra intro as being, just sort of pound for pound, shot for shot, the best of G.I. Joe. But this is great. We get Flint leading the charge here. Again, it's got some great hero shots within it. But let's get into the episode. This miniseries starting in a very familiar way. G.I. Joe escorting a major plot device through an undisclosed sort of desert location, expecting Cobra to show up. Lo and behold, they do, and the battle is on, and we get some debuts. Right off the bat here, we get the Crimson Twins. I love the Crimson Twins, Zaymot and Tomax, so cool, and great action figures, great characters in the show, and this is where we get them, and right off the bat, we're getting their great sort of speech pattern. I love this sort of them fit the way they deliver their dialogue, finishing each other's sentences.
I don't know, it's kind of like we almost finish each other's sentences, kind of.
I mean, I don't think we've ever finished each other's sentences.
Also, with Alpine and Bazooka debuting and taking the fight to the Crimson Twins, we get to see immediately the Corsican effect, where one twin feels what the other is feeling. Not really a power or an advantage, as very often it is usually to their detriment, as we see here in this episode, although not always. We'll see later on in the miniseries how it actually can benefit them in some ways, but it's just such a memorable aspect of these characters. And whenever, I see other shows talking about like, oh, the twin thing or anything like that, it brings me right back to G.I. Joe. That's what I remember the most. I think they did it best. They did it most memorably for sure. And we see it here at the start of the Pyramid of Darkness. So G.I. Joe, Cobra battling. It's a great action sequence. And one thing that caught my attention here is that we, in this miniseries, start to get to see a little bit of Cobra Commander crying retreat a little bit more, maybe showing the tendencies that he would be sort of become most known for throughout the run of G.I. Joe. And we start to see it here.
Retreat! 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 Wait for me! I'm your leader!
Cobra Commander, for better or worse, starting to show some of those hallmark signature tendencies that I think he is most known for. A cry from, how it started with the mass device and got up through here. But I have to also point out, he was yelling for retreat, but he was not yelling to surrender. And we actually see Cobra Commander with a backbone, even against some pretty incredible odds in G.I. Joe. The other thing to point out about this is not only is Cobra Commander not surrendering, but we find out later on in the episode that sort of this was all part of his ultimate plan anyway. So maybe he was just playing a little bit of possum to lull G.I. Joe into a false sense of security that they really did have the upper hand and had foiled Cobra Commander's plan. So I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt on this one, that he was not sort of being that craven Cobra Commander that he is sometimes accused of being, but rather this was playing into his master plan all along, which was getting that extra cargo aboard the shuttle on its way to Space Station Delta, smuggling in the Dreadnoks and those Fatal Fluffies, which we will be talking about momentarily. Before we take it up to Space Station Delta, though, we have to take it under the sea, where Shipwreck, Snake Eyes, and Roadblock, they take the sharks. They're in hot pursuit of Cobra Commander and the Crimson Twins, who are rescued by those water robots. They give chase. There's a big battle down there. A few almost DYDs throughout this scene. I mean, I mentioned the water robots using the submarine like a baseball bat to take out Snake Eyes' shark. Ultimately, I wanted to highlight this scene with the water robots and the chase, not because it's what brings us the DYD. We'll get that from another scene, but because of how important it is for Shipwreck. One, we get the debut of Polly, and Shipwreck has some of the great dialogue in this episode throughout this miniseries and the animated series itself. And a lot of that is because of the dynamic that he has with his pet parrot, Polly, their ability to have a back and forth. And it starts right here in the Further Adventures of G.I. Joe. Some really great stuff between them. And as I say to Mrs. Retro, Polly is a valuable member of the G.I. Joe team, and it starts right from their first appearance. But this is where Shipwreck and Snake Eyes break off on their own side mission, infiltrating the factory underneath Enterprise City, and showing that Shipwreck is going to be a focal point of this miniseries and the animated series moving forward. And it starts right here. Shipwreck taking on sort of almost like Flint's role from The Revenge of Cobra when he broke out on his own sort of side mission with Mutt. And, that's where they found Shipwreck. So kind of funny sort of symmetry there that now Shipwreck is doing that in this miniseries. But yeah, just showing that he's going to be a really important factor and a big player here in G.I. Joe. And Shipwreck, of course, doing it with his own signature sort of rascally, roguish panache that only Shipwreck can bring. And he's a fan favorite for a reason and really gets kicked into high gear here in this miniseries. All right, let's take it up to Space Station Delta. Let's talk about the Fatal Fluffies. So Cobra Commander, with his master plan, was able to sort of feign defeat, but really able to smuggle aboard the Dreadnoks and this mysterious cargo. G.I. Joe is wise that something is on the shuttle that shouldn't be there, but still they let the shuttle dock, and still they unload this bit of cargo sort of a little cavalierly, in my opinion. We'll talk more about that. But we get the opening up of this crate, and out pop these adorable little cuddly creatures. And before they become the Fatal Fluffies, just immediately welcomed with open arms by Scarlet and the rest of the G.I. Joe team. They just think, oh yeah, they're these adorable pets that made their way aboard our top secret G.I. Joe space station. And I said they're cuddly, but polarizing. Why polarizing? I think the Fatal Fluffies exist at sort of the center of a question that is often asked in the G.I. Joe community, and that is, how much sci-fi is too much sci-fi? How much weird is too weird? And so I want to put it to you, are the Fatal Fluffies too sci-fi for G.I. Joe, according to your tastes? Or maybe you love the Fatal Fluffies. Let me know. Me, I exist somewhere sort of in the middle. I think that they fit fine in the confines of this miniseries as being sort of a one-off harebrained scheme of a creature that Cobra deploys here. So I like them. They're not my favorite thing, but I don't think that they sort of stick out because they are just sort of confined to this one miniseries. If they were a reoccurring baddie, I might feel differently about them. They're not as jarring to me as, say, going back and rewatching the G.I. Joe movie and Cobra Law. I think Cobra Law is another thing that people feel like crossed the line with G.I. Joe. So with the Fatal Fluffies, I get it. I sort of see it as a product of the time with Star Wars being as massive as it was. But let me know, how do you feel about the Fatal Fluffies? And yes, they were almost an MIA in their own right, but wouldn't you know it, they're getting a Comic-Con exclusive this year. And that, to me, that's exactly what a Comic-Con exclusive should be, kind of a deep cut, something that wouldn't be released regularly in the line. But I digress. And even that announcement was polarizing. I saw a lot of different reactions about that exclusive. So I want to dive into them a little bit more, because the more I sort of dug into it, the more interesting it got. And something that I didn't know until relatively recently is that the Fatal Fluffies were originally going to be Zartan's Dreadnoks. Like, that's what Zartan was going to be commanding, this sort of brigade of Ewoks that transform into evil Wookiees kind of deal. That was going to be the Dreadnoks. And Larry Hama put his foot down and said, no, absolutely not. I think, paraphrasing, he's like, kids aren't going to want to see their heroes shooting at Cobra's version of the Ewoks. And again, Star Wars, massive at the time, Return of the Jedi, all that good stuff. So Hasbro wanted to get in on it, and their solution was to have the Dreadnoks. And I assume that maybe is why they were named such, sort of play off a Dreadnought and Ewok. I don't know for certain, but that's something that sort of caught my attention, because I know what a Dreadnought is. I've heard that. Dreadnoks growing up, it's like, is this just something they made up? And so it makes a little bit more sense the more you pull on that thread. But I think, like I was talking about, I can appreciate and accept the Fatal Fluffies for what they are in this miniseries. But if they were the Dreadnoks, if they were continuing on this sort of band that Zartan was commanding, I think I would probably feel different about them. So hats off to Larry Hama in this case, for putting his foot down and saying, no, we can't do this. That can't be who Zartan is commanding. And that's why we get the Dreadnoks. As we know them today is this sort of biker, Spinal Tap, Mad Max styled crew that Zartan has. But with that in mind, I do think it is an interesting nod, and I do think it's intentional that it's still, even though he put his foot down in this miniseries, it's Zartan that is commanding the Fatal Fluffies. And I do think that it's Zartan and the Dreadnought. So that was really interesting to me, going back and rewatching this with the knowledge that they were originally supposed to be the Dreadnought. So that was definitely intentional, in my opinion. Maybe a little bit of a sort of, well, you got your way in the comic books and the toy line, Larry, but dang it, we're gonna have our evil Ewok Wookiee hybrids, and Zartan's gonna be leading them. So we still get it in the cartoon. They had their way. But I mentioned also in the top how the Fatal Fluffies are the missing link, or are they the missing link to one of G.I. Joe's greatest controversies? And this also deals with Zartan. So not breaking any news here, very well known. Zartan's original file card ended up getting pulled, not recalled, but mid-production. They changed his file card to omit the psychological profile, talking about him having multiple personalities and schizophrenia. And because, there was backlash from the sort of the mental health community, that it reinforced a violent stereotype about those being afflicted with that. Hasbro, again, mid-run, changing the file card, not a recall, but they did donate an undisclosed amount of money for, mental health institutions and things of that nature, trying to sort of get some good PR out of, a tough situation. And this is the 80s. So I bring that up, and I want to tie it back to the Fatal Fluffies here, because let's take a look and a listen to Mutt reading that card again from Cobra Commander.
These adorable creatures are called Fatal Fluffies. I'm sure you will enjoy their deadly secret.
The discrepancy between what Mutt says and what is written on the card is nothing new. It's been talked about in the G.I. Joe community for years. It's just sort of this interesting quirk of animation or a mix-up. But with everything we've talked about with the Fatal Fluffies today and their original intent of being so connected to Zartan, I couldn't help but see a connection there. And again, with the sort of what was written on the card was enjoy their amazing split personalities, what was originally on Zartan's file card, and both happening at very similar timelines. Zartan had to have his file card change late 1984. G.I. Joe was rushed into production for season 1 at around the same time. Maybe not enough time to change the animation, but enough time to record some new dialogue, put it in there so no connection will be made, and avoiding any further controversy. I just think it's really interesting, and I definitely think that the original wording of that card is a nod back to their original intent in being tied to Zartan, and maybe a little bit of a wink and a needle towards Larry Hama that he got his way, but Hasbro still remembers. That's just conjecture on my part, but they do all sort of feel interconnected, and it was really interesting going deep about the Fatal Fluffies. I never thought I'd be saying that. I thought they just were sort of these weird creatures. I didn't know that there was so much backstory there until recently. But we've talked enough Fatal Fluffies. Let's get into the rest of the episode. And one of the things that stands out about this first episode of the miniseries is just some really crisp, snappy dialogue throughout. And rather than just toss to each one individually, because multiple characters had some great standout moments, I just wanted to give a little dialogue montage to you right here.
Pitch in, guys. This is one woman who hates to break a launch date.
First they want me to fly, now they want me to dive. The minute they ask me to dance, I'm getting out of this outfit.
Faster, sailor! Put the pedal to the metal! I'm a parrot, not a duck!
Keep squawking and you'll be a gone goose.
Put her in reverse or it's gonna get worse. Can't hold back. Suction too strong. Wrong again, chrome cheeks. Make Bumperface entirely unwelcome. That nickel-noggin bozo's all the Cobra brass we've got.
Some of G.I. Joe's real strengths, just really memorable dialogue to go along with some top-tier voice acting talent. And we saw that on display throughout this episode. I really love Shipwreck talking about how the minute they ask me to dance, I'm getting out of this outfit. Very much so foreshadowing what would come to pass later on in this miniseries. So buckle up, Shipwreck. Get your dancing shoes on because it's going to be happening. And then, of course, Flint with a trio of savage insults for Cobra Commander and Destro. Chrome cheeks, bumper face, and then for Destro, nickel noggin bozo. Great voice acting from Bill Ratner, just great delivery. Loved each of those insults. And it was Jim Williams who suggested back when Destro was laughing at Zartan that maybe we do a hater of the week or an insult of the week. And if that becomes a reoccurring segment, or if we had that here, Flint would definitely win it going away in this episode with all of those insults. I loved it, but it's not just the line delivery that was memorable. In particular, on one brings us to our "But did you die?" moment of the week.
Did you die?
I got shot.
But did you die?
So it's near the start of the episode when Flint hurls that first insult, calling Cobra Commander Chrome Cheeks in a way that only Flint can. But it's when he's doing that, he's flying the Sky Striker, and this is what just jumped off the sort of the screen to me. He's flying the Sky Striker, and we've seen Flint do some really fancy flying in the previous miniseries, but he is coming at Cobra Commander and uses his wing of the Sky Striker like it's a mech sword to cut Cobra Commander's hiss absolutely in half. And he just keeps on flying. It just doesn't work that way. It's absurd in the best way. It's wild. It's crazy. It's our DYD for sure. In an episode that had options, but that to me takes the cake. Flint using the wing of his Sky Striker to blow up a tank and then keep flying like nothing happened. I mean, Flint, I'll say it again. Is he a better pilot than Ace? He's making the argument with moves like that. But that is our "Did you die?" moment of the week. So Flint gets the DYD, and he's really just all over the episode with hardware and potential hardware, and maybe this one he doesn't want to be associated with. We'll see if he wins it, but it is time for our foul-up of the week.
You're here because you're the industrial straight follow-up.
Thank you, Sarge. And the foul-up of the week has some stiff competition, although no sole winner, I would say. I think there's a lot of blame and a lot of fouling up to go around with the things that I was debating between. And let's keep it with Flint for a moment here. Flint and Lady J, they had Cobra Commander on the ropes. The Crimson Twins, dead to rights, seemingly captured. They escape courtesy of the water robots, but they escape nonetheless. Destro, they're chasing him in the Rattler and their Sky Strikers. By the way, some fantastic animation in this Sky Striker chase of Destro through Enterprise City, but it's 2-on-1. Flint and Lady J, they're going to try and corner him. Destro is able to escape, of course, in the Rattler and make it to Cobra Commander and the Crimson Twins. So
This hasn't been our finest hour. Cobra Commander, the Crimson Twins, and Destro slipped through our fingers. Shipwreck and Snake Eyes are missing. And now we can't make contact with the shuttle or space station.
And then later on, after Zartan has taken over Space Station Delta, they accept a message from the space station thinking, oh, thank God, we've made contact with G.I. Joe again. And Zartan proceeds to completely blow up and destroy the current G.I. Joe headquarters. So, keeping score, lost Cobra Commander, lost the Crimson Twins, lost Destro, lost your headquarters. Your pets' heads are falling off at this point, Flint and Lady J. So that is why they're duly in the running for Foul Up of the Week. But then on the other side, we'll go back up to the space station and we'll go back to the Fatal Fluffies. And I'm not talking about any missing links or controversies here, other than the fact that G.I. Joe was incredibly lax with the Fatal Fluffies and letting them overrun the space station. They properly detect early-ish on that, hey, like there's some added cargo. They surround the cargo with their guns pointed. And then when they see it's this weird alien creature that, yes, I grant you, is adorable, they immediately lower their weapons. Scarlet embraces one and just completely get caught unaware when Zartan reveals his disguise and reveals the Fatal Fluffies' true nature with their split personalities. And G.I. Joe surrounded, they lose the space station. That's what leads to the base getting destroyed. So really tough call here on who should be foul up of the week. Scarlet and Duke and her squad at the space station, Flint and Lady J letting so many of Cobra's top brass escape. And it is really, really tight here. But I think given that, you're on this top secret space station, you know that there is something that is a foreign body that should not be there on your space station. You're on alert already, only to lower your guard and get captured on your space station by the Fatal Fluffies. I'm giving foul up of the week to Scarlet and her squad on Space Station Delta. But maybe you go the other way. Certainly the argument has been made. It was nip tuck for me as well. I just think that the fact that even if Flint and Lady J had captured all of the Cobra top brass, he'd already succeeded in smuggling the Dreadnoks and the Fatal Fluffies aboard, so that still would have happened. G.I. Joe HQ still would have gotten destroyed. Cobra Commander and Destro and all of them probably would have escaped then anyway. So, and I mean, just the visual of Scarlet embracing this foreign creature that is aboard your top secret space station, it's just, no, come on. You can't be doing that. You got to be on your guard and a costume. So that is our foul up of the week. Very close. As close as it's maybe gotten here at GI Retro. And finally, if there's a foul up, there must be an MVP here at GI Retro. So let's go ahead and break down who the contenders are for this week's MVP.
On a night where you thought, well, he isn't quite himself. How good can you be? MVP.
I think you could argue that Cobra Commander was in the running for MVP, had some great memorable lines, did elevate the episode. His plan is going swimmingly so far. But for me, the two real contenders were Shipwreck and Rob Walsh. And Rob Walsh is who did the music for G.I. Joe. And not a traditional thought for who would be the pick for MVP, but we've talked about it before. The music of G.I. Joe is so exceptional, and it goes beyond just the iconic intro music and theme. The score throughout is phenomenal, and it really was a character in this episode. In particular, when Shipwreck and Snake Eyes were in particular, when Snake Eyes and Shipwreck were infiltrating the Cobra factory. Just take a listen.
Cobra Commander, the great snake rules forever.
R.I.P. Rob Walsh, your music, so incredible, really selling the emotion and the intensity of that scene up all the way through the cliffhanger with the Cobra security robot demanding the password and the voice recognition, the spikes and the blades, really sold by that great music. But ultimately, I'm going to give the MVP to Shipwreck. Him and his dynamic with Polly just put it over the top for me. And like I said, taking on sort of a Flint-like role and a focal point role starting in this episode. Some great lines. So your MVP for this episode is Shipwreck.
Ah, nice day, huh? Or nice night. Who cares down here, right? Am I right? You see, nobody wants to know a subway philosopher.
I can attest, as somebody that used to take a lot of public transportation, Shipwreck is absolutely right. No one does want to know a subway philosopher. Thank you so very much for watching. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and rewatch the show. They're all available there for you. Let me know in the comments your picks for MVP, DYD, Foul Up. What do you think about the Fatal Fluffies and their original intended connection to Zartan? And are they too sci-fi for you? Let me know, and when we see each other next, it will be time to rendezvous in the City of the Dead as the Pyramid of Darkness continues. But until then, if you didn't know, now you know. Take it away, Flint.
And knowing is half the battle.